All right, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us today. So if you joined previous LinkedIn Live sessions, you know that we've been focusing a lot on AI, which we'll continue to do today. But previous sessions have included the practitioners that are implementing AI into their programs. And today we're going to switch it up a little bit and focus on some product conversation. So we have with us some product folks who are at the forefront of utilizing AI in building technology. So today we'll talk about, any trends that we're hearing, opportunities that are still out there, and also challenges that product teams are facing. And really what we want to focus on today is what the future of AI is in, all things learning, whether it be enablement, learning and development, customer education. So with that, I am going to welcome our guest today. So we have Corey Bajak, who is our head of development here at Bongo. We have Josh Squires, who leads our growth and strategy. And then Karine Pagano, who is a product leader and strategist that's focused on AI and data solutions, specifically for learning and skills. So right now, Karine is the CEO of Asano, but she continues to consult with organizations, both big and small, on skills and data and AI innovation. So let's get going. So, all right, question to all of you. So we know that, many products are incorporating AI to help with efficiency. But with that in mind, what are some other trends that you're seeing or starting to see that, either have been or will be significant in building tech with AI?
Well, I can kick it off here. Honestly, I think efficiency is still a key selling point. You can bring everything back to efficiency in some respect for any enterprise software. Corporate employees are always being asked to do more with less. So I think efficiency is the name of the game. You can really sell ROI in the enterprise software space. I think the big trend we're seeing is that, you're no longer getting credit for kind of like a little chat box or something like that and saying we have an AI solution. Relevant and useful is the name of the game, right? So you have to think a little bit more about how an AI solution can really augment your current capabilities and add significant value. One thing I'm seeing in this space right now, I'm really interested to hear, from Karine on this front as well, is that, it's getting very competitive, right? Like in the last 18 to 24 months, it's just been an explosion of AI technologies. And one good thing about that competition is that we're seeing rapid evolution and also some costs being driven down for some of the capabilities out there with third parties. And a good example of that from my team's perspective is, when we first built out our AI coach capabilities, we had to develop this really complex chunking algorithm so that we could provide contextual feedback on a longer video. And 12 months later, we don't need that anymore, right? I wish I had, could have seen that we could have avoided that effort because it was very sophisticated what we had to do, and we were very proud of it. But the cost has gone down such for tokens that we're able to effectively, evaluate longer videos in Bongo without having to worry about how we stitch everything together into a cohesive prompt off to an AI model.
Yeah, I think if I look at the trend, even in the last 18 months, I think the first trend was coaching, where there were a lot of chatbots and a lot of here, interact with this technology. And I think we saw pretty quickly that that was problematic in a lot of ways because the technology is very new, and so coaching kind of was the first piece. I think we're in the midst right now of the content era where everyone's thinking about how can you use AI for content? And this is specifically in the learning realm, right? There's a lot of thinking and I think investment into how can AI help with content bottlenecks. But I think where it's going to get commoditized pretty quickly if it hasn't already, that's just a tool that everyone's using and it won't really be a differentiator. I think the next wave will end up being context, where you've got content, but now you can add contextualization to a lot of different scenarios. And I'm super excited for that one because that kind of gets us into the personalization and a lot of the adaptive learning kind of use cases that have really been unattainable, I think, from a scalability perspective for technology solutions. So I think we're going to enter that era maybe next year. I don't want to make any year predictions, but I do think in the next 12 months, we'll start to see, a lot of companies coming out with content tools, a lot of companies coming out with content features, but the real money is going to be in the contextualization and how can we make this relevant and interesting for folks. I personally am excited about when we get to the point that we get back to the coaching model, but it actually works. So
Right.
that sounds very flippant, but I do think that the initial idea of like, wow, we can use this for coaching, or we can use this for practice and feedback and giving us insights and being that coach is super interesting. It's just not working very well right now because we haven't gone through the other stages to get to the point that coaching becomes really meaningful. So
yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, talking about starting with coaching and then content and context.
Yeah,
kind of the nexus of all of that stuff. That seems to be kind of the holy grail that people are probably after.
I don't know. If we don't add data and business impact in there, then we're all just kind of spinning wheels here. So we got to be able to report on this and be able to visualize it. And then the person who writes the check needs to be able to say, yeah, we did increase or decrease or move the metric one way or the other. So I don't know. I mean, I 100% agree with everything that you guys said. It's but let's see the next iteration of the AI agents and those waves too, because I think it's getting cool.
it is. It's getting very cool. It's getting cheaper. It's getting. I think one of the things that I am noticing just from a landscape perspective is that there will be tools and features and kind of the stuff coming out that everybody uses because they're using LLM models. I think that shift of eventually there will be the public models and the publicly available data, to your point, Josh, and then organizations, and this is where I think it'll get really interesting, will have their own content, their own data, their own models. And the folks that are focusing right now on those superficial kind of public models, LLMs, kind of the feel good features, will start to lose traction to the organizations who are thinking about the long-term play of having their own data, building intelligence, being able to actually add value because of the data and context that they're able to provide. So I think we'll start to see those pockets of people that are particularly good at particular things because they've been investing in the long term rather than just leveraging the public LLMs for intelligence.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point you bring up there, Karine, about the larger models too, is because we've talked before, I think in some prior sessions, about the concept of model decay. Is people are more significantly relying on these models, these large language models, to help build content, and as that stuff goes back into the engine, you're starting to get to a point where there's a divorce between human produced content and what the models are being trained on, that could lead to, I think it could be susceptible to more hallucinations and things like that in the future, if that follows that trajectory long term.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely leads me to my next question, which is, how should product leaders, based on, do we build it ourselves? Do we rely on, these public models? What should they be thinking about in terms of where are the opportunities? Where do we make that decision to stick internally, go outside? What are the setbacks? What are the risks to make those decisions?
I have so many
Take this one first, Karine.
So many opinions.
Yeah.
So I've been, if you follow my social media stuff right now, I am very bullish on the fact that the preconceived ideas of learning platforms and technologies that are kind of the front door to learning, or learning as a place where you go as a destination, is going to start to fade away, because organizations are going to start to build their own AI intelligence within their own environment and their own context. And they will want learning experiences to be tied into their data, their data models, their AI, right? Like all of their AI intelligence that they'll start to build out internally. Now we're early stages, but I think it's a real reckoning for what does organizational learning look like if people are starting to use their own internal AI intelligence to fuel that rather than external data and content models. So that differentiation between what are just publicly available things that our people need to know and learn that we're not going to invest in versus what are the things that are specific to my organization that we're investing in AI and models and data modeling and all of the things, they're going to want their learning to tap into those and not necessarily be hosted or tied into B2B SaaS platforms. And like, I feel like this is a crazy thing to say because I worked in B2B SaaS and learning my entire career. But I do think that there will be a future in which that's not really necessary anymore. That you can, and I think it will give rise to very cool point solutions that solve specific things within organizations that they then integrate in and tie into their larger ecosystems that's based on their data and their models and the AI intelligence they're building for their infrastructure. So if that does come to pass, that's really crazy disruption in what is our current technology landscape and the learning market. It changes the game from like learning integrations into data integrations more broadly that are tied back to business value, like Josh mentioned. And it really disrupts this idea that learning is a separate thing, or skill development and a lot of what I talk about is a separate thing from work and processes. And so learning gets really closely tied to the working models rather than being a separate
Whoa, Corinne. Are you actually saying that learning in the flow of work is coming back?
Did we ever have it, Josh? I don't know that everybody talked about it. I don't know that we ever had it. But
Yeah. I had a bot that let me know that I could click on something in Slack and I'd have to go somewhere and I'd learn stuff. I mean, that's not it.
It's just going to mean we're going to have to rethink and recheck a lot of the assumptions we had about what organizational learning looks like. And it's going to be a mental model shift, I think, for a lot of folks, but I don't see another future. Like, I don't see another model coming. So
I mean, I think one thing that, has to happen for that to come to fruition, though, is, and something that the learning industry honestly hasn't done a good job of ever, which is standardization of interfaces, right? Is that if you want to have an ecosystem of tools available that can commonly interact with, enterprise data stores that are, provided by a wide array of different software providers and vendors, we got to have some common interfaces in order to get that data and to interact with those. And, I think that's something that will have to get onto the radar before something like that can really become a reality.
Corey, please don't say you're saying SCORM 1.5. I mean, like that's not what we're saying, is it?
We can all look to the age of the different interfaces we use today and how difficult it's been to evolve those and get people to standardize on anything, right? For something much simpler than this, right?
Wild thought. AICC 2.0. All right. Any takers?
Yeah.
But a lot of those were data standards. What I think is interesting about that, Corey, is that the LXP idea or model when it first came out was this idea of like, well, maybe we just create a common place where everybody goes to learn, right? Like created a destination for end users. And that people could actually navigate and want to go to because LMSs were too hard. Like LMSs were built for orgs to deliver compliance and track things. LXPs were delivered for learners to find learning and be able to self-serve and all of those things. If we say those things are, and LXPs now are kind of LMSs and they've created this big mush of like, right? But if we're saying that that's not necessary anymore, then the idea that we need to have some standards of like the integration actually becomes really important. Really, and thinking about like how technology actually integrates into flow of work, back to your kind of
Right.
Good joke, Josh. But it's true, right? Like there's this idea of what does user experience actually becomes really, really important in a world where we're integrating new experiences into work and we're not creating new places to go or like creating new new kind of like destinations. If we're saying we're building tools that integrate into your workflows,
Right.
then you have to think through that user experience piece, which has been, I think, very hard for the learning technology industry to think about it. And it's been much easier to say, no, you just go here to do your learning and then we can control that environment. Now we're saying maybe we don't need to do that. And the future may not require it. So how do we now take learning back to the people? How do we take it back to the people?
Yeah, and that's my exact question. There's an echo. I think we could probably all agree with what you have all just said, but without these standards in place or without everyone kind of on board to that idea right now as kind of innovative product people, how can you kind of build before if you build it they will come type thing, or what's kind of your approach with being innovative when not everybody is there yet?
You got to take some risks,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think one thing that we do here is, I have to recognize that this space is evolving too quickly to keep up with as an individual. And I have a team of intellectually curious engineers who just love technology for the sake of technology, and I got to have open ears. I listen to them, right? And multiple times a year we sit down and we talk about ways that we can evolve our product or even do something kind of adjacent to our product, utilizing AI technologies they've heard about, whether there's something that's built internally or publicly available models that we can utilize just to evolve things. And it's a safe space, excuse me, with no wrong answers, right? Is that the first time we did one of these sessions, there were some ideas that were probably labeled in the kind of like this isn't realistic / crazy bucket that 18 months later, 2 years later they're almost there, right? So I think we just need to continue to evaluate the technology landscape and really just rely on our people who just have a passion for this.
Yeah.
I also think just learning needs to understand enterprise better. Like, where do people actually work and collaborate together? Like, it's we know some of the places, right? Like, we know some of the platform behemoths where people are using tools to do their job. And communicate and collaborate with each other. I think while there have been some integrations in with those technologies, I think one of the things that's been really interesting for me to reflect on is that when you get folks that are building content libraries, or you get folks that are building like big platform performances, they all want to track the success of their product. And so they necessarily drive traffic and users to their product. And so they don't integrate well. They don't play well with others because their selfish like justification for existence and for measuring ROI is to start to capture all of the data. Well, when you have a whole ecosystem of technologies that are built to try to selfishly drive traffic to their own platform, then it creates real barriers to cool integrations and user experiences and flow of work kind of methodologies. I think this idea of headless LMSs or headless platforms or learning experiences allows us to think. So it really, I mean, back to Corey's, like, you have to pull the ideas together. You have to question why are we doing it this way? Like, what is the rationale? And does that best serve our customers or does that best serve us? And how do we kind of break the mold of how a lot of the technology, the assumptions that we've made and how these technologies work? I think that's going to continue to rapidly change.
I think for me, it's all about friction and frictionless, right? And for the longest time, I mean, to kind of your point, Corinne, as far as, everybody's looking for their user count so they can then bill against those users. So I think that has to change. and maybe it's a consumption model, or maybe it's the token thing that no one can really quite figure out. But it is something that has to drive utility, right? So if it's got friction, then that means I can't really use it. I've got to like go and click a bunch of times, or even if it's a single sign-on into a learning platform that I then am kind of trapped. There's no such thing as Netflix of learning. Sorry, guys, that's a myth. You don't want to go and do learning on the weekend. But if I've got a problem I've got to solve on the weekend, then let me solve that problem quickly through a search that's contextually relevant to something that is contained within the organization. But really I'm still struggling with a lot of organizational use of AI solving non-problems. A lot of content providers, a lot of content authoring tools I see on the market right now are taking, as an instructional designer or recovering instructional designer, the one thing I like doing is instructional design. I don't like clicking the buttons in the authoring tool, right? Don't take that part away from me. Take the clicking the buttons, the copying and the pasting and the doing the things, right? But let me be creative and give me a tool which I can be creative with. And so where do we drive business impact? And again, I'm going to hammer on it because it's one of the things that our field in general has done a really bad job historically, because we don't speak the language of the business very well. That's not our first language. It's our third or fourth language. And as a result, everybody's feeling sidelined, and you can look at a lot of threads, but ultimately for me, it is that idea of friction less, and solving a business problem. And if we're going to build tech, let's build tech to solve small problems at the first, right, and see where it goes. We don't have to make the next killer app. That's not our jam in L&D, so to speak. So yeah, if I have to say anything, frictionless.
So my next thought is, and we're talking about what doesn't exist yet and what we'd like to exist, but in your world, and this could be personal, professional, whatever, what are some really cool things that you're seeing with AI right now? Are there any products that you're using? And again, think outside the box of of kind of learning right now.
Bongo. Oh, what? Sorry.
Bongo is cool. So for me, a lot of the really interesting video, and I'm not a video person, even though I've worked in a lot of companies where video is a significant part of what we delivered, but the ability to create art, music, like video quality and production, even the really bad AI images are getting better. Like the free ones are getting better. Like it's really interesting to me how that's evolving, and does kind of signal to me that we're entering an era of like authenticity being a differentiator. We're already seeing it a little bit of like people having to do disclaimers around AI, but man, some of the stuff that's being created is so amazing that like better than this is, I feel like when I say stuff, I'm like, oh, should I say that? But some of it's better than I've ever seen humans produce, right? Like you're seeing things that are being produced that are so realistic or so interesting or so kind of out of the box, and you can do it quickly and at scale, that I think that will have a dramatic impact on how we think about interacting with the world and content and eventually learning. Like, what does that mean and what are the implications? But I'm definitely watching the kind of art, video, media space for the AI innovations that are coming up.
I mean, even tagging onto that, Green. I mean, like just playing around with like Google's Notebook LM. I was messing around with it last week. Saw a couple things on LinkedIn. Dropped in a text document. It's like, all right, podcast done. Let's ship that bad boy. And now they just launched where you can actually have a chat with it real time. I'm like, okay, that's getting kind of cool. So, if we're looking at like private kind of data models where I can then just have a chat against this one document, and it comes back to me in like a podcast quality presenter voice or voices. I mean, it's getting kind of cool.
So
yeah, I mean, I think I agree with.
Sorry, Corey. I didn't mean to
No
cut you
worries.
off. But like, that's my question. Like, I wonder with all this cool stuff being produced, will people say, "Oh, that's AI"? And we do the uncanny valley thing where our brains are like, "Well, that's not a person." It's super interesting to me to think about how we start thinking about interacting with these things.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I think it's legitimate that, the artistic community has gripes, right? I mean, if you recall like recent strikes and things like that, one of the things they want to include in their negotiations is, responsible use of AI in the artistic community, because some of the stuff looks pretty darn good. One thing that was an interesting, like, kind of side note, it's not necessarily a new technology, but it's more of an interesting application of technology that I just read about this past weekend is this guy in Tokyo ran for the governorship of that district, and younger guy, software developer, and he came in fifth place, right? So he didn't like win, but he took a surprising number of votes. And what he did is he built out a manifesto for what he believed would be for the betterment of the district, right? And covered all kinds of different topics and categories. And then he dropped it into a language model. And he had a avatar hosted to answer questions, and people could interact individually and answer questions, and it answered on behalf of him based on what was in that manifesto that the model had been trained on. The AI avatar answered over 8,000 questions on policy and his decisions on things, and people had actual interactions. It's like, in my head, it's like, is this better than human interaction? No, right? I'm sure it's not. But is it better than no engagement at all? Right. And that's the thing that I get into a little bit when we talk about, like, Bongo and the AI coach and things like that we have. It's like, sure, if you could have a subject matter expert sit next to you, and whenever you decided you want to talk about something, validate how well you understand it and have a conversation, that'd be ideal. I'm pretty sure that doesn't scale. So is having something interacting with AI, it's not as good as that, but it's better than nothing, right? And so it's kind of like finding this right balance where the tool can be used. And like I said, there's actually other politicians now in Japan who have kind of picked up on this and are playing with this idea of, having your Q&A bot answer some of your questions on policy.
Well, and I just to build off the Bongo example, and since I don't work there, I can say this probably. One of the things that I think is most interesting for future is to be able to scale feedback and like actually give insight and feedback. And we haven't seen a lot of instances of that yet. Bongo is, I would say, the outlier in terms of really being able to like give feedback to someone on their performance, or based on a presentation, or based on answers to a question, and to actually give feedback at scale. Like that kind of idea that we touched on earlier of coaching content and context, you're already doing that at Bongo. Like it's all synthesized in. And I think that that's where like informational interactions are super cool. I love ABBA Voyage, which is my media thing. But Bongo is actually taking the interactions and giving people feedback that then you can iterate and use. And I think that's where like the human performance piece and performance improvement becomes really interesting from a learning perspective, when you can leverage that to not only like use all the cool new tech, but to give people meaningful feedback to improve themselves is really powerful. So I'm looking forward to that. Improving and continuing.
Is bright.
Continued investment there, definitely strategically where we want to place our bet.
Yeah, no, thanks for saying that, Karine. And
appreciate it.
This is going to cut us off now, so I'm going to wrap it up. But there's so much out there, and we've covered a lot of ground today. So I guess the headline is, if you think you want something, just look for it, and it might exist. It might be in its infancy, right? But I think the idea is what people are after now, so that we can build something that's everyone wants and needs. So thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day.
Yep. Thanks, guys.